all going to be learning. Okay. We'll start over. Um, um, I would like to have Mr. Fringer go over a little procedural items so that we can kind of work our way through the process here. And we're learning as we go. So if we make a mistake or there are any errors, we'll acknowledge them and we'll make those corrections and just move forward in as smooth a manner as we can. So Mr. Fringer, would you instruct us how we will be using our Chromebooks or our electronic devices to interact as a board?
Good evening, everybody, and any guests who might be watching in the live stream. This is the first attempt at a virtual board meeting here in Council Bluffs, being related to the COVID-19 situation that we're in now. So we are going to, the best we can, get through this meeting with as much understanding as possible. What we would like to ask participants to do is to mute themselves, to mute their microphone. You should still be able to hear what's going on, but mute your microphone so we don't hear the background noise. If you are going to be called to speak because you've called in for public participation, or if you're called to the podium by the superintendent, then we will ask you to unmute at that time. And we will do our best to get through this, and I'm here to help Mr. Kazire and the other board members.
Thank you, Mr. Fringer. And now I'm calling to order the public hearing for the Council Bluffs Community School District. This public hearing is in regard to our 2020 through 2021 budget. Let the record show that all board members are present during this electronic meeting, and that we are holding this meeting as an electronic meeting. Again, this public hearing is regarding our budget for this coming year. And at this time, I would turn the microphone over to Dr. Murillo so that she can designate her staff member to go over the presentation. So, Dr. Murillo, the floor is yours.
Mr. Kazire, if I may interrupt, we have a board member who is having audio trouble.
Okay. Dr. Ogres is having some audio trouble.
No.
It's not me. Ms. Shudak is having trouble hearing. Ms. Shudak, are you able to hear us?
I can now. You're the first one I can hear.
Thank you. Mr. Kazire, I think we're able to proceed now.
Okay, thank you.
Can they hear me? Dave, I'm still. How about now? Can they hear me now?
I can hear you now.
Okay, this is I'm going to ask Mr. Wilson, our Chief Financial Officer, if he will go through the slides for our public hearing on the 2021 budget. Mr. Wilson, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Dr. Murillo. And Dave, Okay, can everybody see the slides? Thumbs up?
Thumbs up.
All right. If you go to the next slide, please. Hang on a minute, we're looking else into something here. Go ahead. Okay. So a number of my comments that I'm going to make tonight, as Dr. Murillo stated, are very similar to what we had the last time, but there are also some other comments I want to make related to what's gone on here the last 2 weeks. So as we look at the 2021 budget, the supplemental state aid compromise between the House and the Senate was a 2.3% increase. We also are budgeting an increase in wages and benefits of roughly $1.1 million based on current staffing. What we also decided to do is, as you remember, we have used a premium holiday, which I'll explain here in a moment, the last 2 years. And essentially what we're doing is we're taking 2 months worth of health insurance premium, and we are not paying it into the health insurance fund because there's enough reserves in the fund that can absorb that. And we did that as a way to reduce the impact on jobs in our district the last few years. What we'd like to do is to wean ourselves off of that. So what we're proposing is that next year, instead of doing 2 months worth of premium holiday, we're going to do a month and a half worth to an additional cost of about $250,000. We also repurposed and aligned some current positions in the district, which provided about $617,000 in savings. And our unspent authority will remain stable around 7%. Now, stating that, spending authority for 1920, the current year that we're in, is expected to drop from 7.9 to 6.7% under this budget as it was written at the end of February. And I'll get more into that here in a minute. Because we had a reduction in state aid for the current year, actually we had negative state aid because our enrollment had dropped for this year. And also we lost our 1% budget guarantee that was just over $900,000. So Dave, you go to the next slide. The goal of the 2021 budget was to stabilize our spending authority amount. And for the 1920, the district experienced the following. As I said, we had a reduction in state aid, and that was about $125,000, and the loss of the one-time budget guarantee of $900,000. So there together, there's $1 million less spending authority that we don't have this year that we had last year. We also had some reductions in some specific grant revenues. We had increases in transportation costs related not only to Madison campus, but the contract that we have in place with First Student. And we also had staff wage increases for the current year. The aggregate of these items is scheduled to reduce our spending authority from 792 to roughly 6.7%. The graph that you're seeing on the screen, when Dr. Murillo arrived in 1718, we had we had an increase in state aid of roughly 1 to 1.5%. And if you look at the average increase in state aid over the 2016 to 2021 year, the average increase in state aid is 1.69%, which is very, very small. And that's the money that we have to use to give raises the next year, to deal with costs that are going to increase. So you can see that the state has put school districts in a very tight budget. The next screen is the certified enrollment trend over the last 7 years. And when we did a study back in 2010, it indicated that the Council School District would probably have flat enrollment for the foreseeable future. And I think is what you're seeing there, that forecast is fairly accurate. The graph that you're seeing on enrollment illustrates that we do need more housing in our district to bring more families and students in to watch that number go up. And I know the city is working on a few things as well to help with that. But until that time, I think our enrollment could remain fairly flat. The average enrollment from 2016 to 2021 is 9,131 students. Dave, you want to flip that? Okay. The unspent authority, this is the balance of what authority we had in prior years that we haven't spent. And the suggested range is to keep an unspent authority between 7 and 10%. Over 10%, you're probably not spending on education that you could, and under 7%, you could run into trouble keeping that spending authority within a range that the state wants you to, and it would also help you manage your budget from year to year. The district, when we did this budget, has a projection of 6.7% for the current year for the 1920, and projected for 2021 is 7.1%. And an increase in the levy will not increase any spending authority. So we could double the levy overnight, and we wouldn't get one more penny of spending authority. One concern that I have is with the whole COVID-19 virus issue, we are actually going to lose some spending authority in the current year. I actually calculated today that we have about $600,000 of wages that are paid by title funds. And what they're talking about at the federal level is that if we're not servicing kids who are served by Title I, then we can't use Title I funds to pay those expenditures. We have to use general fund money. Also, we could have the same thing happen with special education. If we're not actually serving special education kids for a period of time, the state is saying you have to have direct contact with the kids. And if you're not going to have direct contact, we're not going to allow you to use special education funds. You got to use that out of your general fund. All in all, if I calculate that out, we're looking at seeing that spending authority now drop to around 6%, not 6.7. And so I'm concerned that going into the next year, we're going to have less spending authority than we had estimated just 3-4 weeks ago because of the whole COVID-19 virus issue. The next slide is the solvency ratio. And essentially, the solvency ratio is simply, do we have a surplus or a deficit, and how much fund balance do we have on our balance sheet to meet current obligations? Our district solvency ratio at the end of June of 19 was 8.68%. ISB and the state recommend a range between 5 and 10, and we're in pretty good shape right now. And the one thing that the solvency ratio does is helps us obtain lower bond interest rates when we go out for bond. And we'll talk about that a little later in the meeting when we have the bond resolution. Dave, next one. What I want to also show you here is this is the taxable valuation per student for the 1920 year by the geographical area here. Those are districts that are around us. And as you can see, Council Bluffs School District has the lowest taxable valuation per student of any of the school districts around here. If we had that green line that you see across there, that is the state average. If we were just, excuse me, the state median, if we were just at the state median, our levy rate would be around $10 to $11 per $1,000 of valuation. But because the valuations are lower in our district, we have to have a higher levy to bring in the necessary amount of dollars that we need. So what we're proposing is a levy of $16.99 per thousand, which is a drop of roughly 6 cents per thousand from last year. And this keeps intact the 49-cent maximum levy that we want to use for our general obligation bonds. As you may recall, last year we said we were going to use some of our save money for that and to keep the levy rate no greater than 49 cents. And this budget does that. So the good news is that our current property tax levy in the current year is $17.05. And we're proposing a levy going down 6 cents to $16.99, which the board will later be voting on and considering for 2021. So with that, I will ask if there's any questions or discussion.
And I need to stop presenting quick.
Okay, if you have a question for Mr. Wilson, would you please just raise your hand so that we can see you, and we'll recognize you, and then you can go ahead and unmute yourself.
hear me?
Yes.
The unspent, your spending authority calculation. I guess that concerns me also with, but that would have nothing to do with like a loss in state tax revenues that'll also occur through this whole thing, correct?
Troy, I'm going to ask you to repeat your question.
I say on your unspent, on your spending authority, we're also going to have running kind of parallel with this, but in a different bucket, a loss in sales tax revenue from the state this year, I'm assuming. And that would affect next year's budget, but it wouldn't have nothing to do with these other calculations, correct?
That is correct. We will lose a little bit in the current year because enrollment was down. It's based on so much dollars per enrollment. But since enrollment's going to go up next year in the 2021 budget, we would get a little bit more save money, but that's in another fund. That's not in the general fund.
Okay. And is there any talk at the state level of trying to help with that? Because I've seen that same thing with special education occurring in many of the agencies that are serving kids, where they're having to show, like where they're having to cut back on staffing pretty heavily. And we've kind of guaranteed that for our folks. Is there any talk about the state helping with that or federal helping with that you've heard?
Troy, I'm going to respond to that because I want to make sure that the board knows that Dean is really looking and projecting at what could be. We haven't received any information from the DE yet that any of this will happen. We know that there's guidelines that state that with our title dollars that we have to be serving students to receive, but we have not received any clear communication on the budget area. So I don't want us to have any concerns right now. What Dean's doing is looking at the guidelines, but we know that as we continue down this road, we will get more concrete information on what the budget will look like next year and if there will be any changes. So Dean is looking at what could happen and also looking at our current guidelines from the USDE and really looking at where we're moving forward. So I just want to make sure that we are knowing that Dean is kind of setting the stage for what could be and looking at our reserves right now.
Okay.
Hi, Mr. Wilson. I just had a question. I appreciate the COVID concern with respect to the laws and paying faculty and staff. Is there any talk about forgiveness regarding that and with respect to what's been going on? I know there's been a lot of other forgiving things that have happened because of COVID, and I just was curious if there was any talk amongst state level or other legislatures that you're aware of them bringing that up.
I've not heard of anything that they've said recently about it, and we're monitoring this daily.
Is that something that we can bring up at the next legislative coffee or another arena where that's something we could bring up to get the conversation started? Dr. Murillo, I think you're muted.
Thank you. Dr. August, that's a great question. In fact, Charlie McConkey, did I say his last name correctly, did contact us asking was there anything that we could take forward. And one thing that I did ask for Diane to respond to him about was us being able to be proactive around the budgeting. And even though it may seem we're not servicing students, we're still responsible for the employees, and that we look currently at what we have and ask that they not make any cuts moving forward. Because right now our budget is set for this year. If they leave that alone and don't make any cuts for next year, then we'll roll right into the next year. It's when they think that they should start cutting that we're a little concerned about. So right now, the DE has been focused on concurrent credit, guidelines for special ed, all kind of that teaching and learning component. I'm sure as soon as we get that in place, they'll shift then to what does full funding look like.
I'm just curious if they'll take a closer look at, instead of us forcing us to use it out of the general fund because of the COVID crisis, if they'll allow forgiveness to let us use it in the previous fund that we've been using it in.
Yeah, and currently they haven't had any kind of guidance on that yet. But daily, we are soon to be having some kind of conference call with the DE, and I'm sure that they'll continue to roll out that guidance to us.
Okay, are there any other questions from board members?
Yes.
Okay, Kyle, you have the floor.
Hey, Dean. So I guess one of the biggest questions I just kind of have here is, I know that you had talked about slowly trying to reduce the premium holidays we're taking for the budget. Do we have any idea how long that would actually take for us to just kind of phase that out, or what that would look like? I know things can change, but any idea on that?
On off now? Okay, it was just delayed. So Kyle, that would be a function of what state aid would be in a future year, what our future costs were going to be. In order to wean ourselves off, I would say probably I would like to do it over a 3 or 4 year period. But again, there's a lot of variables in play with that.
Okay, that was my biggest question, was what that looked like, but obviously there's a lot of moving variables now, so I understand.
Okay, if there are no further questions, we'll just wait a moment here just in case there are any other questions. If not, I will go ahead and close this public hearing, and we will take this action up then during the regular board meeting. This public hearing is now closed. And now we are opening this regular business meeting of the Council Bluffs Community School District Board of Directors. Mr. Wilson, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Minshaw?
Here.
Mr. McWade?
Here.
Dr. Ogres?
She's here.
Here.
Mr. Arthur? Mr. Arthur?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, thankfully. Mr. LaFurla?
I'm here.
Ms. Hudak?
Here.
Mr. Kazire?
Present. Okay, as we enter this moment of silence, find a comfortable position, seating, whatever is comfortable for you. And during this time of silence, let us be mindful of those around us who are supporting us as we navigate through these uncertain times. So as we take a deep breath in and exhale, let's observe a moment of silence. Thank you. As you are able, please rise with me to join in our Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation,
Under God,
indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, before us now, we have Before us now, we have the approval of our agenda. Is there a motion?
I would move approval of the agenda as presented.
Second.
We have a motion. We have a motion and a second. We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Opposed, same sign. And the motion is carried. Before us now, we have the approval of our work session meeting and workshop meeting of March 10th and the emergency meeting of March 15th. Do we have a motion?
I'll move to approve the minute of the of the work session workshop meeting of March 10th and the emergency meeting of March 15th as presented.
Thank you, Ms. Hudak. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Arthur. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, we'll move to the vote. All those in favor of approving the minutes signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And our meeting minutes have been approved. Now is the time for public participation. This is a time for our members of the public to address the board concerning board agenda items, or for that matter, any items that they have concerns. We have one individual who has called in for participation. So this is Ms. Durfee. She will have 5 minutes to address the board. So Ms. Durfee, the floor is yours.
Ms. Durfee, I don't know if you are muted, but we cannot hear you speaking.
There we go.
We can hear you now.
Thanks. I never thought I'd be so excited to see you guys. No offense, but I've missed you all. So this is fun. I'm Gina Durfee, and I'm speaking on behalf of the Council Bluffs Education Association, and we really just wanted to take the time to thank each of the school board members and executive administrators who made the difficult decision to close school before it became required to do so. Though we'll never know for certain, it's likely saved a number of lives, including those of teachers, students, and community members. We want you to know that your willingness to take a stand in favor of teacher, student, and staff health and safety was not unnoticed by us, and appreciate more than we can say. We also want to thank the board for taking the unprecedented step to pay teachers through at least 4/14 during this never before seen crisis. This allows our members to care for themselves and their loved ones without additional worry of how they'll pay their bills. The decision to pay staff not only provides comfort monetarily, but also provides a sense of mental wellness and eases anxiety in these difficult times. We cannot predict the future. CBEA members are confident that the board of CBCSD will continue to do the right thing as they did in the original pandemic resolutions, not only for their teachers, but also for support staff. And I see you're having another pandemic resolution tonight, which I think you guys are awesome for. People will remember this, your teachers will remember this, your community will remember this, and that's important. It builds trust and goodwill with all staff involved. To know that the board has our backs means the world to the CBEA, its members, and all other staff involved. I also really want to take the time to thank all of the teaching and learning staff that allowed teachers to spend their last day with students, working with students, rather than scrambling to create and give students work to do at home. I had many CBEA members share with me the weight that was lifted not only from their shoulders, but also from their hearts when they learned that teaching and learning would take care of everything and take care of everything they did. Thank you to all the teaching and learning department. I don't know who all was in, please make sure that gets passed along. We also want to show our appreciation for the ongoing communication from Human Resources and specifically Gary Milborn. While dealing with how to move forward on school closing and attending countless meetings, I'm sure himself during the day, he was quick to respond. He answered any questions and shared concerns in a really positive way. This is a source of calm for me specifically in answering members' questions, but I think for everyone because Mr. Milborn and his Human Resources staff have been really great to work with. We also want to thank Nutrition Services and Student and Family Services. They've really stepped up to make sure our kids are fed breakfast and lunch. It has really helped teachers and staff alleviate worry about kids because, as you guys know, the concern teachers have for their students does not end just because the school doors are shut. As a matter of fact, some of us are more worried than ever. So thank you, CBCSD Nutrition Services and all the volunteers making that happen. And last but definitely not least, our custodial staff stepped up to increase sanitation prior to the closure while continuing with their regular duties. As always, thanks to our building and maintenance staff for being there for us and making our buildings clean, safe, and welcoming. I'm sure we've forgotten someone, and I'm sorry for that. I really wanted to take this time to thank all who have made this incomprehensible time a little easier to handle. We are truly grateful to work with the individuals and groups of people who have one another's backs. Please accept our sincerest thanks and gratitude on behalf of the Council Bluffs Education Association. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Durfee. We really appreciate those kind words. I'm sure the board, I can speak for the board that our sentiments match yours completely. We are so very thankful for Dr. Murillo and her executive cabinet and for all of those individuals that have been working with our students and our teachers and our staff to make sure that students have those things available to them so they can continue this uncharted area of learning that we're going through. Okay, is there anyone else who wishes to address the board during this public participation time?
There are no emails, Mr. Kazire, and the public was directed to email.
Okay, Mr. Fringer indicated that there were no emails sent to the board for public participation. So at this time, we are concluding the public participation and moving on to item 3, which is our superintendent's report. Dr. Murillo, is there anything that you wish to impart to the board at this time?
Not at this time, Mr. Kazire.
Okay. Next, then, we will move to item 4, which is our resolutions. First being item A. We had the agenda item has been modified, and I'd like Mr. Wilson, if he would lead the discussion around the bonds and how things have changed within the last 48 hours. Mr. Wilson, would you please lead us during this time of the portion?
Yes, so am I off mute here? just checking. Okay, so as Mr. Kazire said, there's been a lot of changes that have happened in the last 48 hours. So over the weekend on the Saturday Wall Street Journal, there was an interesting article about how the municipal bond market has started to dry up and that people were not bidding on those issuers because there's more people asking for cash than there was cash available. So I was on the phone with Piper Jaffray, our consultant, and we came up with a scenario that said, what if we don't get any bids? What if the bids are high? What should we do? And so based on what happened today at 12 noon regarding the sale of the bids, we modified the agenda. So let me just go through exactly what happened here. So the district received 6 bids on the bonds, and the interest rates vary between 2.76 and 3.21, which if you look at that, you say, well, that's not too bad. But 10 days ago, we were down about 1.5%. Piper Jaffray, through a competitor firm for various legal reasons, then asked a couple of banks if they were interested in directly placing the bond issuance with the bank rather than selling them as open bonds. We had 2 bids. We had Key Government Finance, Inc., which is a bank out of Denver, Colorado, They offered a fixed rate of 1.37%, and JP Morgan Chase offered a fixed rate of 1.09%. Unfortunately, the JP Morgan proposal was contingent upon their credit check, which they said would take a week. And we felt that that was a risk that we did not want to take because we have no idea what interest rates are going to be, or if banks will be lending for municipal bonds within that time period as well, as banks are getting inundated for cash requests from their customers at this time. So therefore, management recommended that the board accept the key government finance offer with a fixed rate of 1.37%. And as a perspective on the bond issuance that we did a year ago in May, the interest rate was 3.11%. So we are getting a very good rate. And the resolution is basically saying that we would reject the bids for the 6 bids that we received, and then accept the bid from Key Government Finance for the sale of the bonds.
Okay, thank you for that explanation. Do we have a motion regarding the bonds?
I will make a motion to reject all bids received at public school sale for the sale of $9.5 million general obligation bond, Series 2020, and approve a resolution directing the sale of $9.5 million general obligation bond, Series 2020 to Key Government Finance Incorporated.
I'll second.
Can you hear me, Dave?
Okay, I was not able to hear the motion, but other members of the room were. We have a motion and a second. Is there discussion?
Hey, Tina, I do have a question. This is Troy. So that 1.37 seems phenomenal. And I saw that series of bonds issued or out there in the market already. And I know that's Key Bank and Key Equipment Group. We actually will get the $9.5 million, right? That's just a crazy rate at 137.
That's correct. It's $9.5 million.
That's amazing.
Yeah, I thought it was excellent as well.
Yeah, given where the current market is, I'm really surprised, and that's great for our people. And I don't know how you put that article to paper, but wow, that'd be a good one to have out there.
Thank you. Is there any other discussion? Hearing none, before us now is the resolution to reject the 6 bids that we received and to accept the one from Key Government Finance for 1.37%. Mr. Wilson, would you please call the roll?
Mr. LaFurla,
Yes.
Ms. Shudak,
Yes.
Mr. Arthur,
Yes.
Dr. Ogres,
Yes.
Mr. Minshall,
Yes.
Mr. McGlade,
Yes.
Mr. Kazire.
Yes. And the resolution has been approved. Before us now is the 2021 E-rate bid approval. Is there a motion?
Move to approve the bids for Category 2 E-rate eligible data switches and fiber modules from Converge One in the amount of $183,687.70, $27,553.16 district out-of-pocket cost after 85% E-rate discount. There's a second, be it resolved. Would you like me to read that as well?
Yeah.
Be it resolved, the board approved the bid for Category 2 E-rate eligible Cat 6E cable from SmartWave Technologies in the amount of $5,359.75, $803.96 district out-of-pocket cost after 85% E-rate discount.
Thank you, Dr. Ogres. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Is Is there any discussion?
This is Jill. So this is changing our switch providers, our network switch providers. Is that correct? That's quite a bit of savings just for switching over the data switches.
Mrs. Shudak, I'll respond to your question. The E-rate program is a federal discount program offered to school districts and libraries. There are two levels of services. One level called Category 1, we didn't have any bids this year. We were all good on our internet service, wide area network service, et cetera. So there were no Category 1 bids. Category 2 are for things that connect the network together inside the schools. Because of our high poverty rate in Council Bluffs, we qualify for an 85% discount, meaning that if we spend $100,000, it costs the school district $15,000 and the E-rate program pays $85,000. So this is a bid for hardware to replace switches in our data closets, something that we do each year. And that out-of-pocket cost is the budgeted amount from the school district, and the rest, that bigger number is what will be paid for by the E-rate program.
Thank you.
Okay, is there any other discussion?
Yeah, just one real quick from me. So Dave, I know that it says that we usually qualify between the 80 and 90% discount. What is it that makes it fluctuate, or when would we actually qualify for that like 90% rate?
Thank you, Kyle. That's a good question. 85% is the highest, is the maximum discount on Category 2 services. So our school district with the community eligibility program and everybody having free lunch qualifies at the highest level. For Category 1 services like internet service and our wide area network, we do qualify at the 90% level.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? If not, before us, we have a resolution to approve the 2021 E-rate bid approval. Mr. Wilson, would you please call the roll?
Dr. Ogres,
Yes.
Mr. Arthur,
Yes.
Ms. Shudek,
Yes.
Mr. LaFurla,
Yes.
Mr. Minshaw,
Yes.
Mr. McGlade,
Yes.
Mr. Kazire.
Our resolution has been approved. Before us now is a set of first reading policies. Is there a motion?
I'll move to approve the first reading of the policies 215 Board of Directors closed sessions and exempt meetings, 216 notification of board meetings, 219 quorum, 509 search and seizure, 629 family night and Sunday night activities, 804 facilities maintenance, and 906 community use of school facilities as presented.
I'll second.
Thank you for the motion and the second. Is there any discussion?
Yes, I had one question if no one else does.
Go ahead, Mr. McGlade.
Okay, so sorry, I'm just trying to find here in the document real quick so I can say what page exactly it's on here. Okay, so on page 1 of 3 for code 215, that's Board of Directors closed sessions and exempt meetings. The proposal is just so the minutes and audio recording shall only be available to board members or other authorized persons as designated by the board. I guess I was just wondering what we were thinking currently for policy, what would be designated as the board and how that just would be asked of us to approve that.
I believe that when the policy was written and when I look back at what the state guidelines, indicate that the recordings are available for those members who were present during the time of the board meeting. That may have changed, but I'm not, and Mr. Wilson is agreeing with that, the statement. The only other time that those minutes would be available would be from order of a judge that would unlock the nature of the closed meeting or exempt meeting minutes.
Okay, thank you.
I do think the question though said something about as designated. Is that correct, Kyle? Like we could designate people that we think could have access.
Yeah, that's what it was. So that was just that
Question. Yeah, so I'm thinking maybe that would be like an attorney or something. If we decided we wanted to have
listen
an
in
attorney
on.
or other employee look at, would that be the correct way to look at that, Dean?
Yes.
That's it from me.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Hearing none, we will move forward to the first reading of our listed policies. Mr. Wilson, would you please call the roll?
Mr. LaFurla,
Yes.
Ms. Hudak,
Yes.
Mr. Arthur,
Yes.
Dr. Ogres,
Yes.
Mr. Minchall,
Yes.
Mr. McGlade,
Yes.
Mr. Kazire.
Yes, and the resolution has been approved. Before us now is an agreement with the CBEA amended.
Second reading of the policy.
Excuse me, Mr. Wilson caught me. Yes, we have our second reading of policies listed. Is there a motion?
This is a long one. Move to approve the second reading of policies 101, philosophy, educational mission, 102, non-discrimination, multicultural, and non-sexist equity education opportunity, 102.1, discrimination complaints, 102.2, complaint form, discrimination, anti-bullying, and anti-harassment, 102.3, witness disclosure form, 102.4, disposition of complaint form, 102.5, annual notice of non-discrimination, 102.6, continuous notice of non-discrimination, 102.7, notice of section 504, student and parental rights, provision of special education, 607.1, provision of special education regulation, 625.1, high school graduation requirements, foreign exchange students regulation, 635, providing textbooks to non-public schools, 636, multicultural gender fair education, 713, bond disclosure, 903, visitors and volunteers in district buildings, 903.1, acknowledgement of understanding regarding search of child abuse, dependent adult abuse, and sex offender registry information for school volunteers, 903.2, Iowa authorization for release of child and dependent adult abuse information, 903.3, Nebraska Child Abuse and Neglect Central Registry, Nebraska Adult Protective Services Central Registry, 909, public complaints, 909.1, public complaints regulation.
Thank you, Dr. Ogres. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. LaFurla. Are there any questions?
Not necessarily a question, but just like to thank Diane for going back after our last meeting and taking all the different suggestions that were made and updating the 909 public complaint section. I appreciate the work that she put in to work through that one.
Thank you very much. Any other discussion? Hearing none, we'll move to the roll call from Mr. Wilson regarding the second reading of policies. Mr. Wilson?
Dr. Alvarez,
Yes.
Mr. LaFurla,
Yes.
Mr. Arthur, Mr. Arthur,
Yes.
Ms. Hudak,
Yes.
Mr. Minshaw,
Yes.
Mr. McGlade,
Yes.
Mr. Kazire.
Yes, and the resolution has been approved. Now we come to a resolution for the approval of the CBEA amended agreement. Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the CBA amended agreement as presented.
Thank you, Ms. Hudak. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Arthur. We have a motion and a second. We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion?
Dave, I was wondering if you could just have, or Dr. Murillo, if you could just provide kind of a background on or sort of summarize how the amended agreement came to be.
Yes, I'm going to ask Mr. Milborn, him and his team, I believe Dean Wilson was a part of that too. Once that we completed last year's contract, at the end this year, we really started noticing that there may be some pieces to our pay scale that needed to be adjusted. And it was a really great collaboration between the CBEA members and Mr. Milborn, Mr. Wilson, and Miss Emily. And so, Gary, if Mr. Milborn, would you speak to exactly the process that you all took? Because I know you met on several occasions and really good work was done during that time. So, Mr. Milborn?
Yes. So we addressed 3 items from the contract last year. One of them, the salary schedule, we knew we were going to have to address because last year the union and us had agreed to try something very brand new. But the 3 items were around seniority, the salary schedule, and clarifying horizontal movement. So back in November, we started a significant amount of collaboration and meetings with Sarah Dressel, the director of the Southwest Uniserv of ISEA, Gina Durfee, Bob Hansen, and Carmen Kinsley were all vital. And then CB members were Dean Wilson, Emily Warren, and myself. And we addressed these 3 issues. So the seniority really was around defining a year of service at 50% of work or more. The salary schedule last year, it led to some raises that were equitable across all teachers, but it caused some other things around teachers having the same years of service, same education being paid a little bit differently. So we knew we had to get together and collaborate around the new salary schedule for this year. Ms. Dressel, Mr. Hansen, and Ms. Kinsley's knowledge of that was wonderful, and we were able to really get a nice, transparent, and clear salary schedule moving forward for this contract season. And then 5.3 was around when we, our horizontal pathways for lane movement on the salary schedule. The contract we felt was a little restrictive last year, so we opened that up and really clearly defined the pathways. So we had meetings multiple meetings in November, multiple meetings in December, 2 or 3 meetings in January, and then we finalized our meetings here in February. So it's been a nice run of collaboration, and we were all very happy with the outcome at the end of it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Milburn. Is there any, oh, yes, Jill?
Yeah. Can you just confirm for me, the CBEA came to the board and asked for that to be looked at, or did we go to the CBA knowing that there was a difference that needed to be looked at?
When we agreed on the contract last year, there wasn't a salary schedule for this year. So the union and us knew that we needed to articulate the 2021 salary schedule. And so while we did that, we addressed the seniority issue and the horizontal movement issue as well.
If I'm hearing you correctly, Mr. Milborn, what you're saying is that there was discussion from last year's budget approval and feedback and comments that was considered and brought forward when this was drafted. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes. Yeah, we knew at the end of negotiations last year that we were going to have to look specifically at that 5.1 this year.
Okay, and I understand that. I just wanted to get clarification as far as who addressed to start those discussions.
Specifically, I think we just reached out to each other. We knew that we had to start the process in November. So I think Sarah Dressel from ISEA has been on a lot of the different districts in the region. She's in the Southwest region. And so when she reached out and said, can I be a part of this as well? She had seen all kinds of different innovative salary schedules and traditional salary schedules. So that kind of sparked our conversation, and then we moved from there.
Thank you.
And then, so Gary, I just have a couple questions for you. So the first one, so with that, would that have just been with like the work group that was added into the contracts for CBEA last year? And was that what we used to just make that group from that addition to contracts?
Yes. So, I mean, I went through Gina Durfee, obviously the president, and also Bob Hansen was the chief negotiator last year. And then they asked to bring in Carmen Kinsley and Sarah Dressel as well. So that's how the group was defined.
Okay, cool. I just wanted to make sure that that's what we were using. That it was good.
Bob and Carmen are kind of the numbers people, so they wanted to be there. And then Sarah has a lot of experience seeing the different schedules.
Okay, and then the only other question, so with the salary schedules, it wouldn't adversely impact anyone. Like they wouldn't suddenly be changed and go down in pay. It would just benefit people. So I guess what's an example of how the changes like benefited employees?
Yeah, so I'll give you a history on the schedule last year. So the increases were equitable through the salary schedule. We did a 0 to 6 years, 7 to 13 years, and that. However, that created some differences. Kyle, let's say you're a teacher with 20 years experience in a master's degree, but you were brand new to the district last year, and we placed you on the salary schedule. And I'm a teacher with 20 years experience in master's degree, but I've been with the district for 20 years. Based on last year's salary increase schedule, we would have been paid differently. Okay. And so people were kind of concerned about that. So the increases were equal, but our pay would have been different. So this year, the salary schedule moves everybody back to getting paid the same, but based on where they were last year, their increases are going to be different.
Okay, just wanted to clarify that. So thank you.
Is there further discussion? I see Ms. Shudak, you have your microphone on.
No, I was just ready for the vote. Sorry.
Oh, okay, not a problem. Okay, before us now, we have a resolution to approve the CBEA amended agreement. Mr. Wu, please call the roll.
Ms. Shudak?
Yes.
Mr. Arthur?
Yes. Yes? Yes, yes, you hear me?
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, Dr. Ogres,
Yes.
Mr. Minshaw,
Yes.
Mr. McGlade,
Yes.
Mr. LaFurla,
Yes.
Mr. Kazire.
The resolution has been approved. Before us now, we have a resolution regarding the SEIU agreement concerning increased wages. Is there a motion?
I'll move to approve this SEIU improve. Let me start over. I'll move to approve the increase in wages for SEIU employees at 2% for the 2021 school year and 1.5% for the 21-22 school year.
Thank you, Mr. LaFurla. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Dr. Ogres. We have a motion and a second. Is there any? Ms. Hudak, you have the floor.
Yeah, so my first question is directed to the board because I believe that this kicked off prior to me being elected. What direction from the board was provided to the negotiation team for what they wanted to see the output or outcome to be from these negotiation sessions?
I guess as a board member, I don't remember we did not provide any input into that, correct?
That's
Well,
correct.
I was going to ask, are these considered negotiations?
Yes.
Well, I'm not sure I would say that they are negotiations. And I'm going to have Mr. Melbourne kind of walk through the timeline of what happened with the SEIU and CWA. They asked to extend their contract for 2 years, did not negotiate a contract with either of the units. What we did do was talk about the term of wages. So we didn't really have a negotiation with them. And that was came back in September. So if you'd like, I could have Mr. Milborn kind of give an overview of work that was done with those two employees and provide an update to board.
And I think that would be great. And Dr. Murillo, you're very hard to hear.
Okay.
Mr. Wilson, if you could mute while Dr. Murillo is talking, I think that'll help with the feedback noise.
Okay. Does that help some? Oh, yes. Does that help some now? A little bit? Let me just.
Yeah,
Is there any
it's
way I
good.
can do anything different?
It's better, Dr. Murillo.
Okay. So what I was gonna have Mr. Milborn do is provide an update in kind of a timeline of the work that's been done and how we reached the agreement that we're at.
Okay, so I'm going to kind of package the CWA and SEIU union together because they happened at a very similar time. Back in early August, August 9th-ish, Bonnie Wither reached out to us and asked if we could just extend the contract for 2 more years and then talk about terms for the increase of wages only. At that time, she expressed that she didn't really want to go to a vote to recertify and that things had been going well with the handbook and things like that. So we said, absolutely. I checked with Dr. Murillo. And so at that point, we extended the contract, signed the extension, Bonnie signed it, informed the board via Friday notes, and then PERB sent out the notification. At that same time, when CWA had reached out to us, we floated that by SEIU. The members of the SEIU had talked many times to us about their fear of if they had to go back to recertify, that they didn't think they would have enough votes to even certify as a union. So we reached out to them and said, here's a way to extend the contract. You don't have to recertify. And they were very happy about that. So that occurred in early September as well. They signed on September 9th. PERB sent out the notice September 11th, and we informed the board on September 13th. From there, we just said, hey, we'll discuss terms of wages in early winter after our budget meetings at the district level. And so we set up meetings with CWA in February. We set up a meeting with SEIU in January. And by then, we had some numbers from Mr. Wilson about our budget, and we met and came to agreement.
Thank you, Mr. Milborn. Does that help answer your question, Ms. Hudak?
Well, I appreciate the background information on it, but my question more, I think Troy answered it, was that the board actually didn't provide any direction as far as kind of where they wanted to see it go. I, being a new board member, reached out to the Iowa School Board Association today to get kind of their feedback as far as how those types of, from a board perspective, how they should go. And it was their recommendation that the board should be providing that feedback in that direction when those negotiations start. So as the parties are negotiating, the negotiators know where the board would like to end up at.
I would say that I agree in theory with that, but I've also heard where they are kind of wanting the board to create their negotiation team, and they go in and they have discussions. They come back to us, and then we start to talk kind of about what the district strategy, if you would say, per se is, or how they're approaching the negotiations, which I think is slightly different than that. Than saying we somehow direct them to go, hey, we want to see them come out at 2.5% this year. And the only thing we did direct was trying to get the dental coverage for the group that did not have that in their contract.
Correct. And I appreciate that we were able to get that dental piece in. I haven't heard, or it wasn't brought up in any of the meetings, how those negotiations were going. So to that point, either way we go, the board should have been, kept up to speed as far as how those negotiations were going to be able to provide input.
Well, I'll just chime in on that. It was basically 2 meetings. So the CWA meeting lasted about 25 to 30 minutes. And then the SEIU meeting, we met one time for 15 minutes, and then they came back at a later date, and then we agreed. So it wasn't kind of like last year when I was with CBA, where kind of our negotiations went over a few months and we were kind of talking back and forth, and there was like a lot of updates of where we stood. It was just, we were just talking about terms of the wages. So I apologize if I had made an error in that sense.
I don't think you need to apologize. I think that, designating responsibility is what we do as a board. And I think that you having the ability to have those conversations, and if there's seamless conversations and there's no room for discussion or negotiation and everyone comes to agreement within 2 25-minute meetings, I, as a board member, don't feel like that needs or warrants further discussion, and that's why it's here on the board agenda.
I appreciate that. So what I want to follow up with Gary is, last year, if we look back to CBEA, we did provide the board with a lot of it as we went along, because we were negotiating a contract. On this one, when they filed with PERB, we really didn't negotiate. It was just about coming to terms on the raise for the next 2 years. So because there was no negotiation, I think that's why Mr. Milborn and his committee we didn't provide as much as maybe we could have, other than to say we're just negotiating, or we're just really going to terms on the salary.
And I can understand where both of you are coming from that. I just disagree. The negotiations are being done on behalf of the board for the board to vote on. And so I apologize. motorcycle drove by. And so I feel that the board should have input in the direction as to where those, even if it's just on the pay increase, as to where we would like to see those end up at.
So I think this is something for us to take up in a board workshop, because I think we have different philosophies, and I think maybe that's something that we can do at a later date. I respect the thoughts that you have, Ms. Hudak, and I appreciate you sharing those with us. I kind of am on the side of the administration does the negotiations, and we provide the updates and bring the negotiated contract once both parties have signed. But I also think that as we go along through a journey of negotiating a full contract, that the board should be in the loop all the way through. When they did not want to recertify is where I think asking a board, I have never been part of asking a board for how much raise do you want versus what we are able to pay in a raise. And so I think talking through the amount of funding that we have, that we are able to, because I would love to offer higher raises than what we are able to offer. I really struggled with what we could offer with CBEA last year, but I also know that the resources we have, unless we would look at eliminating positions to increase the wages, and that's not a position I am in favor of taking. So although I know the board would also like to see us offer more higher wages than what we offer, I also know we have to live within our means. And so that is certainly where we are, and certainly be able to talk that through at a later date, hopefully in more detail.
Yeah, I guess, Dr. Merle, I appreciate that. I mean, obviously, a board's first responsibility is the financial health and wellness of a district. And looking at kind of the current conditions we're in, you know, kind of highlights that the unexpected things that can come up in a district, you know, paying higher wages, you know, how we treat employees. Those are all things done to grow the district. Those are thoughtfully done by our teams. I think we're always trying to come together to support our teachers and our staff to the very most that we can, but also recognizing that we have to stay within certain budgetary guidelines and things mandated by the state and mandated by our own budget. So I think the board has to come first from that financial thing standpoint, and then look at kind of what all can we help to achieve to improve the lives of our teachers and improve the lives of our students.
Thank you. Jill, I see you're on your mic.
Yeah, Troy, I appreciate that, and I'm not trying to be, you know, defensive or argumentative. I have a hard time with the SEIU and CWA being our lower paid groups to, you know, have a 1.5 on that second year. I think that that's kind of my sticking point on both of these. And I understand, you know, that we don't know what we're going to be guaranteed the following year, so that is hard to negotiate out that second year. But when our average cost of, you know, inflation is 2.3%, and we're coming in under almost a full percentage on that second year under that, it's just, you know, hard to agree to that second year. But I understand your point.
I understand that. You know, the hard thing is the inflation number may be high or higher, but we don't actually get that amount of money, you know, which is the hard part. And, you know, this year that inflation number is going to go down pretty significantly, which is going to be hard for us. But I think I would say probably since I've been on the board, we've been fully supportive of the SEIU and CWA, the members, and just trying to get them as good of a deal as we can, our teachers. Because I think we feel they often would fall they would fall behind almost what the teachers did, because they were a smaller group and just didn't seem to really want to rock the boat, I guess, if that's the word I'd use. Knowing them, I think they were just really happy that we, almost like love them so much as a staff as we do. And that's why the dental thing just hit me so hard. And I feel like I would much rather have it where we can help impact their lives and their abilities to raise their families and things, knowing that that we're doing that within a budget, budgetary environment that's challenging for us also. And even getting good employees is hard, given what the economy looks like around us. But I understand where you're coming from.
Thank you for the good discussion. Is there anyone else who wishes? Yes, okay, Mr. McGlade, you have the floor.
Yes, so I have just a couple of like more specific questions about their contract. So I know in the SEIU one in particular, part of their contract actually covered that the district supplied like hairnets, gloves, stuff like that for their employees. Are we going to have any issues being able to fulfill that part of it with all of the stuff currently going on in their contract and being able to actually supply that for those employees? Or do we have any sense on that?
Currently, we have enough of those supplies on hand. Now, a month from now, I don't know. But if we can buy them, yes, we will supply them.
Okay, I wanted to just check on that because I know that that was in there, and if it's just an extension of that contract, I wanted to make sure we have that on our minds because that's just been universally something that's been challenging for people across the board. And then the second one, I just know with SEIU and CWA, one of our big things that we wanted to focus on was the equitable nature of the different contracts. And I know with CBEA, we had included in that contract the working group that permitted them to be able to meet with between the employee like leadership, however they broke that group up, and then district leaders. Do we have any sense or what we're doing for that? Because I know right now that would not have been included in their contracts, but do we have any kind of language where we actually would also do that for those employees, just like the CBEA employees?
Yes, Kyle, in the CBA contract, we call that the Labor Management Task Force. But this year we invited SEIU and CWA representatives, and we meet with each group individually. We do this all in the same time frame, and then we meet with all three groups all together to see if there's any shared concerns to represent all of our employees. And so our talks with the Labor Management Task Force has mostly been around handbook revisions and any concerns that are bubbling up within the schools. Mm-hmm. So both of those unions are represented in that task force.
Yeah.
So those they are part of that. That's just because I just know that wasn't in that initial year that we had established that, and then was it like a year later when we did build that in? I wanted to make sure that one, they were represented, and two, actually see that they were still having their voice in it. So because that's something that's important to me.
Yeah. And Mr. Milborn, would you also explain I want to make sure I'm correct in stating, the CBEA contract, year one was 1.75?
Correct.
And the year two was a 1.5.
Correct.
So we were able to do a little bit better for CWA and SEIU.
Dave, I want to make a statement here. This is Chris. It sounds like we, as a board, probably have a few things that we need to work through, in a work session at some point. But I did want to compliment Gary and the negotiations team, regardless of what our philosophy is as a board on contract negotiations, or in this case, coming to agreement on terms. I think we all agree that we want a negotiations team that is really reaching out and trying to be a partner with the union negotiation team. And I feel like Gary and his team have really done that. The sense and the feeling that I'm getting is, that we are negotiating in good faith, and we're really trying to do what's best for employees on both sides of the negotiations team. So I just wanted to compliment Gary and the negotiations team for their work on this.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. LaFurla. Are there any other discussion points? Hearing none, we will move forward with the resolution to approve the SEIU agreement that includes increased. Mr. Wilson, would you please call the roll?
Okay. Mr. LaFurla,
Yes.
Dr. Ogres,
Yes.
Mr. Minshaw,
No.
no, Mr. McGlade,
No.
no, Mr. Arthur,
Yes.
Ms. Shudek,
No.
Mr. Kazire.
Yes. And the resolution has been approved.
I don't know if you're on sound.
Dave, I think you're muted.
Yeah. Before us now, we have a resolution regarding the agreement with the CWA. Is there a motion?
Move to approve the increase in wages for CWA employees at 2% for the 2021 school year and 1.5% for the 21-22 school year.
Thank you, Dr. Ogres. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Arthur. We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion?
I just have a question for the board here. Assuming that we're, moving into the second of two approvals of, changes to the terms of a contract, and, we had a 4-3 vote there. What board members, what are you looking for? What would you prefer to happen as an alternative to approving these contracts tonight?
I'll speak personally myself that it's the second year at the 1.5%. That's just extremely low. I would be looking for the negotiation for the teams to go back and negotiate and see what we can do to get higher on the second year.
For me,
Why would that be? I'm just curious.
I would be comfortable with the 2% like we did given the first year.
And how does that add up mathematically for us as a budget?
Well, I'd have to look at that, and that's part of why we would want to, sit down as a board prior to going into the negotiations to look and see kind of what's available there.
But that's what they've agreed to, correct?
Yes.
That's what was negotiated and that's what they agreed to. That was the two conversations that were held. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. And so they're happy with the terms that have been offered. Is that correct?
That is
I don't know if I'd use the word happy when the second year is 1.5. They agreed to it.
But their lead representative agreed to it. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
So breaking up the silence here. So personally for me, I think it's just having that labor task force actually included in the contract. I know it's only included in the one contract, and what we had passed was under the guise that we wanted everything to be universal across the board for all the different employee groups. And that's what I actually voted for, that for the CBEA contract. And just without that, I don't feel as comfortable voting for it differently on this contract. So, I mean, just in terms of consistency on that, that's what made me feel comfortable with the CBA contract.
But Gary, correct me if I'm wrong. We're not approving the contract. They came and they wanted an extension to the existing contract that we approved last year or the year before. They just wanted new terms on the salaries, correct? If we say that we want to renegotiate the contract, they have to go back and recertify.
That is correct.
Correct.
So we're not approving, we're approving what they asked us to approve.
No, we're aware of that, but that's not a contract that I'm comfortable approving. That doesn't change that.
But if we vote no on this, we're telling the union they need to do exactly what they asked us not to do and recertify.
That is correct.
get concerned about if we kick this back to the negotiations team, what does that timeline look like? I know that when there's not a contract approved for the following year, employees start to get a little nervous about whether or not they're going to have a job next year. And, you know, we run into a situation where we might have a difficult time filling positions.
Yeah, I would echo that, Mr. LaFurla. That has been a concern of ours. I want to ensure our staff that they have a contract, that they have jobs, that the school year of 2021 will continue seamlessly. I do know that Mr. Milborn will ensure that SEIU and CWA is included in that labor task force, and that we will ensure that they have a voice at the table. They currently meet monthly, and the structure right now is that CWA comes in first and then spends a half an hour with SEIU, and CBEA comes first, spends an hour, and then SEIU and CWA comes in following, so that they're all together with Gary for about 30 minutes and talk. And then we have CWA and SEIU has time with Gary, Mr. Milborn, and his team. And that is a monthly meeting that's being held. I have had no issues or concerns raised. In fact, I think that if economy would bounce back and there's something we could do differently to increase pay for all employees, I am certainly for that position. That is something that I believe that we should do as much as possible. Right now, we're living within our means without cutting any positions. And that is what I don't mean positions, but cutting any positions with employees in place of them.
Dr. Merle, I have a question here real quick. Is that something that we could possibly add in I know we have added addendums to different contracts in the past. Is that something that we could look at adding the labor task force into that?
Yes, I will definitely do that. We will make that happen.
That would be something that I would appreciate a lot. So thank you. That's just something I'd like to see in the contract. Just make it the same across the board. And that's what made me vote in favor of the CBEA thing.
Okay, perfect. We will make
And that's an addendum we could add to the SEIU agreement as well.
Yes.
So Gary, could you explain what would happen if we directed you to go back and renegotiate the contract? What that would mean for the two unions involved?
Well, we wouldn't be renegotiating the contract because the contract was extended. So we would have to go back and talk about terms of wages, right? And I think someone mentioned, I can't remember who, especially in these times of uncertainty, it starts giving me a little heartburn to start thinking about staffing and making people feel comfortable about moving forward next year. And so, you know, I would follow direction where Dr. Murillo gives me, and we would sit down and open this back up to discussion. But it gives me a lot of anxiety to delaying this even further when we want to start projecting and staffing for next year and providing people with kind of comfort during that.
So just going into this, because I know we've done it in the past with like the CBEA one. I think there was a change that we made to the contract that we didn't have to negotiate with the union. It was just something that had been added in that the board could approve of. We had done that. Actually, it might have been to the SEIU CWA contracts in the year, like the spring after we had approved, or they had passed in the fall. Is that just something that we could bring to the board to vote on? And would they need to be, I mean, is that something that we would negotiate with them, or is that just something that the board could vote on? I'm not certain what that looks like.
We could write a MOU just like we did with the CBA one we just passed earlier today.
Okay.
So if we wanted to write an MOU that stated there'll always be this number of representatives from each union group on the labor task force, that wouldn't be a problem at all.
Okay.
You know, I just want to say, hearing all this, just how I'm hoping that the unions would feel and our board members would feel that kind of the guarantees of salaries. We're all about giving our people peace of mind. And that I hope, having talked to teachers who were so happy with even how their packets were produced, even some vocal teachers happy about how we produced how learning instruction produced those packets for their final days to be easy, that people would know that our main focus really, we have our students and our teachers and our staff are all pretty equal almost in our eyes, and that we're trying to make their lives better at all times. And that I think we've had some just crazy negotiations in the past that really was really divisive, and that's not who we are as a people, and that's not who we are as a district. And I wish people just remember to keep that top of mind. I understand wanting this addition to the task force, but really, we are there for our employees.
And if next year SSA comes back at 4%, like it really needs to be, we could certainly come to the table and say, we want to change this, right? And provide a 2 or 2.5, or, I mean, it'd be wonderful to provide a 4% raise for everybody. But we don't know what SSA will be next year.
Well, right now, what has been approved is the 2.3.
I'm talking for the year, the 21.
Okay, for the 21-22 school year. That is correct. We don't know what that would be. And yes, we could provide increases if the state would allow us a 4%.
Thanks, Chris. That's kind of some of the sticking points I had is the uncertainty that if things did get better, that we might be able to go back and do more for our employees. And I appreciate what's gone on both sides, and I'm happy with the dental being added. That was a big piece. I agree with Kyle. I like the idea of having more representation from the employees on these in these negotiating meetings or roundtables. But I think this is a good discussion, and I do agree. I think we as a board do need to talk more about this, and there is some learning we can take from this for future negotiations or contract extensions. I think that's part of something for myself. I was kind of viewing this as a negotiation, as a contract, and it sounds like that's not what it was, just an extension of the original one, which we did already approve as a board, if I'm correct.
Yes. Yes. I'm not hearing John.
Okay. And John, we're not hearing your feed.
We heard him. The answer to that was just a contract of extension.
Okay, thank you. Is there any further discussion? Mr. Blade?
No, yeah, I just appreciate that your guys' willingness to look at doing like an MOU or something with those two unions, just to see them added in. Just that was my big contention, so I would appreciate that, so that they have something that's actually policy as opposed to just an understanding.
Yes, we will make that happen.
And that's part of the reason why I asked the question. I just wanted to try and figure out what it was that was missing from the SEIU agreement that, wasn't appealing to some of the board members. Because I think, at least for me, I'm not as knowledgeable, as how some of these things work. And if you just ask the questions, maybe we could figure out a way to make things work for everybody. And I agree with Jill, Ms. Shudak, that I would love to see a higher percent increase for both, for all staff in that second year of this extension. But we don't know what we're going to get for SSA 2 years from now. And I think that it would be our responsibility as a board if in 2 years SSA comes at 4%, then we should do the right thing and, come in and give them a better raise because they deserve it after several years of what I would consider to be, not valuing what their worth is based on the SSA that we're getting from the state.
Thank you, Chris. I mean, I think this was a good discussion for us to have. I appreciate everyone taking the time to answer the questions. And I don't know if you guys can hear me now, but I'm trying with the audio here.
I heard it.
We got it. Okay, hearing no further discussion, before us now is a resolution to approve the CWA agreement, which includes increased wages. Mr. Wilson, would you please call the roll?
Dr. Ogres,
Yes.
Mr. Arthur,
Yes.
Mr. Minshaw,
Yes.
Mr. McGlade,
Yes.
Mr. LaFurla,
Yes.
Ms. Shudek,
No.
Mr. Kazire.
The resolution has been approved. Before us now, we have a resolution regarding the 2021 certified budget. Is there a motion?
Move to approve the 2021 certified budget with a levy rate of $16,990. Troy Arthur, this is where I need you. 16.99197. Science, not math.
Second.
Thank you for the motion and the second. Is there any discussion?
I guess I just I appreciate that we're slowly trying to move past doing the premium holidays as much as we can. I mean, I know it's not necessarily the most ideal situation to be in really any way we spin it, just with what the budget can be sometimes, but I do appreciate that we're looking at slowly trying to move away from doing those. And I think the administration's actually taken some really good measures to try to see how we can not touch classrooms.
Thank you, Mr. McGlade. Any other discussion? Hearing none, before us is the resolution to approve our 2020 to 2021 certified budget. Mr. Wilson, please call the roll.
Dr. Ogres,
Yes.
Mr. LaFurla,
Yes.
Mr. Arthur,
Yes.
Ms. Shudek,
Yes.
Mr. Minshaw,
Yes.
Mr. McGlade,
Yes.
Mr. Kazire.
Yes, and the resolution has been approved. Before us now, we have a final resolution regarding pandemic pay. Is there a resolution or a motion to approve the resolution?
I'll move that we authorize the pay to substitute teachers, paraeducators, their customary and regular pay for their jobs that were pre-scheduled in the frontline absent management from March 17th through April 14th, 2020 during the temporary closure.
Thank you, Ms. Hudak. Is there a second?
Second.
Is that Kyle?
Thank you, Mr. McGlade. Is there any discussion?
I would, again, just like to take a moment to agree with the previous comments made by Gina as well as Dave earlier. I truly appreciate everything that Dr. Murillo has done by putting together these resolutions, these pandemic pay resolutions, getting them ahead, being a leader not only in our community, but also in our state. I appreciate all of the communications that you've provided, not only to the board, but also to the public. It is truly needed in our community, and I just thank you, thank your board, thank everybody that's involved for being the leaders that our community can look to. Thank you.
Thank you so much for those kind words. I really appreciate it. The team worked really hard, and it's great to see that you guys were able to notice the work that we completed. And I'm really proud of us for the work that we did, but I'm really proud of the board for the support that you guys gave us. So thank you too.
I do have one question, and it's just a clarifying question for this. I understand it's the pay, and I believe I read it's their benefits as well, right?
It, for the substitutes, it is just pay only, correct? Mr. Milborn, nod at me.
That is correct. They substitutes do not receive benefits unless they qualify through the ACA process.
And Mr. Bilbert, can you clarify for resolution, the two previous ones for salary and hourly, that included their benefits, correct?
Yes, it did.
Thank you so much.
And then Mr. Milborn, one quick question for like the substitutes and paras for if they would qualify for the ACA enrollment period. Does the board have to do any action later on here to lengthen that window at all to make sure that that's a just for them to be covered by that, or what do we need to do for that? Anything?
No, we would just extend it. We can extend that at our level. Basically, there's windows that the federal government sets, and then we have to set our own window within the federal level. So we could still extend if we were able to return back to school.
Okay, sounds good.
If there's, Mr. Arthur, your mic, okay, you just went off. Before us now, if there's no further discussion, is a resolution, pandemic pay 3.0. Mr. Wilson, would you please call the roll?
Ms. Hudak,
Yes.
Mr. McGlade,
Yes.
Dr. Ogres,
Yes.
Mr. Minshaw,
Yes.
Mr. LaFurla,
Yes.
Mr. Arthur,
Yes.
Mr. Kazire.
Yes, and the resolution has been approved. Before us now is our consent agenda that has item A is the 2019-2020 attendance center course enrollment. Item B, special education contract. Item C, personnel agenda. Item D, February 2020 purchase card activity. Item E, February 2020 financials. And item F, the disbursements, February 19th, 2020 through March 18th, 2020. Is there a motion?
Move to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Thank you,
I'll
Dr.
second that.
Ogres. And I believe, Mr. Arthur, you were our second?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, before us now is the resolution approving our consent agenda. Mr. Wilson, would you please call the roll?
Dr. Ogres,
Yes.
Mr. Arthur,
Yes.
Ms. Hudak,
Yes.
Mr. Minshaw,
Yes.
Mr. McGlade,
Yes.
Mr. LaFurla,
Yes.
Mr. Kazire.
Yes, and the resolution has been approved. I've got one question to ask here, and then I've got an item to read. So let me just take a quick moment here. Okay, thank you, Dr. Marilla, for that clarification. I do have something prepared here to read, and this is in regard to the pandemic pay resolutions 1.0 and 2.0. As many of you know, the Board of Education passed two resolutions during a special meeting on March 15th that provided all Council Bluffs Community School District employees uninterrupted pay during the scheduled 4-week closure. The board is prepared to vote on a 4-week extension of that resolution during the April 14th board meeting, Board of Education meeting. While we do not know yet how long school will be closed, we want all employees to know how much we appreciate them. And we don't want any of you to be worried about your paychecks as you stay home, care for your families, and remain healthy and well. So with that, one last item. As we begin to navigate these new waters, let's be mindful that when all around there is chaos, be the calm. When all around is despair, be the hope. And remember, it only takes one light to block out the darkness. So be that light. With that, our meeting is concluded and we are adjourned.